Hello and welcome to the Peach Basket Los Angeles Clippers post-game report. I'm Jose Salviati, former Clippers featured columnist at Bleacher Report and current contributor and editor at thepeachbasket.net. I'm excited to be joined tonight by Griffin Greenberg as we recap and discuss tonight's 102-90 Clippers win. Before we get into it, I wanted to give Griffin an opportunity to introduce himself. Griffin, how are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me on, Jose. Obviously, a better note to talk about a Clipper W tonight, as opposed to last game where we were thinking about talking about it, but couldn't. But yeah, I'm a college student. I'm majoring in sports journalism. I have covered the Clippers for a few years for my own blog and a couple other organizations. And I'm currently an announcer and also head of social media for AZ Compass, which is one of the top prep schools in the nation for basketball. So I've just been, involved with basketball coverage for 4 or 5 years now and look to continue that. And obviously I've done so with the Clippers and the Peach Basket with you guys.
Yeah, outstanding. Yeah, glad to have you here. And I think you told me earlier for a while, I know not currently, for a while, you were a season ticket holder for the Clippers. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. That's right.
Right on. So we've got some pretty deep Clipper knowledge here and excited to talk through not just tonight's game, but you brought up the Kings game. We might dip our toes into that as well. Tonight's recap and every recap we do here at the Peach Basket is about you, Clipper Nation. It's about the fans. Please make sure to leave your comments or questions, and we will work hard to get to every single one. One note, we cannot see comments from Twitter. So if you're watching us on Twitter, while we're grateful, we won't be able to see any of the comments you might leave there. So please join us on either Facebook or YouTube and send us a comment. We want to interact with you. We want to share the pain with you. Tonight's game was at times tough to watch. We want to answer your questions. We want to share your comments. So please join us on Facebook or YouTube for that. Last order of business before we talk Clippers basketball is to let you know that tonight's show is sponsored. And I'm honestly really excited about tonight's sponsor, and I think you guys are going to love it. Symbol is a stock market for sports that allows you to profit off your sports knowledge. On Symbol, you can trade sports teams like stocks. Every time your teams win, you earn cash. Use your sports knowledge on Symbol to buy low, sell high, and earn cash payouts when your teams win. Join the 7,000 plus early adopters who have already started to invest in their favorite teams. Visit www.simbull.com/peach to create a free account. And when you deposit, make sure to use the promo code PEACH to make your deposit risk-free. I know that sounds too good to be true, but I checked and it's 100% true. Visit symbol.com/peach, use the promo code PEACH, and your deposit will have a money-back guarantee up to $500. That means even if you lose money, Symbol will refund your initial deposit. No questions asked. Join Symbol and start investing and profiting from your favorite teams. Thank you to Symbol for their sponsorship tonight and for offering what I think is a pretty cool promotion and a pretty cool platform. Please check them out. Now, let's talk Clippers basketball. We're going to start with the score, obviously 102-90. Paul George led the Clippers with 21 points, 0 for 3 shooting from deep. Like I alluded to earlier, it was not a pristine Clippers game. I tweeted during the game that the Clippers are a veteran, smart basketball team that make rookie dumb mistakes, and it's baffling. But tonight, I think the saving grace for the Clippers was the fact that there was no Dame Lillard, there was no CJ McCollum. So those 3-point shots that would have come from them came from Robert Covington, came from Larry Nance. And, those two guys just aren't known for making threes the way, obviously, Lillard and McCollum were. But at the end of the day, it's a W. That's what you want. But certainly lots to be concerned about, I think, for Clipper fans and for the Clippers in general. So that's a general overview of the game. That was my thought. I thought it was a muddy game, but you got to win the muddy ones. And tonight the Clippers did that. Griffin, what are your thoughts in general about tonight's game?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a pretty interesting game. Offensively, the Clippers we saw really struggled at certain points of the game. Obviously, in clutch time, they turns it up a little bit more, which they've done so over the season. They've been pretty good in clutch time. I also felt like we didn't see a strong game from one particular player throughout the course of the game, which I kind of wanted to see going into this one. I thought Luke Kennard had a pretty good first half, didn't do much in
Right.
the second half. I thought Reggie and Paul George did much better in the second than the first. But I didn't really see a lot of consistency from the team tonight on either side, really, except for, Nurkic pretty much.
Yeah, and we definitely need to talk about Nurkic and that little issue at the end, which I saw differently initially, and then I saw it in slow motion. But we'll get to that. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what's troubling right now about the Clippers is that lack of consistency. You saw Luke Kennard have a great first half. I think he's averaging 16 points over the last 3 games. And that's kind of the player he needs to be consistently. Brandan Boston obviously had flashes, but nobody really kind of carried the load, and that's a great observation. What we want to do tonight, as opposed to just kind of talking in generalities, I wanted to just kind of call out 3 things. This is something we do at the Peach Basket when we recap our games. We talk about the star of the game, the biggest concern, and surprise contributor. So let's start with the star of the game. Now, I think the star, like most MVPs, is Finals MVPs, got to go to the winning team. So for the Clippers, who's your star of the game tonight, Griffin?
I'm going to actually balance between two. I'd say Luke Kennard because I feel like if he didn't get it going in the first half like he did, then the Clippers just would have been lost going into that break. So he's one of my stars of the game. Another is Paul George for, just the tough shots he hit. And he did make a pretty big impact on the defensive end as well, to put the Clippers over the edge in this one.
Yeah, and that's why I give the nudge to Paul George. I'm a big Kennard fan, so I love adding him. But yeah, PG's got to be the closer, right? And that's what distinguishes the Clippers from a lot of other teams right now that are, the Clippers without Kawhi. They've got a closer, right? And a lot of teams don't. And I think about teams like the Spurs that are a good basketball team. I think better than their record shows. Don't necessarily have a closer. Not many teams have a guy like a Paul George that you can really rely on to take and make that final shot. So he did that tonight, and he's absolutely, in my mind's eye, the star of the game. Let's talk about surprise contribution. Before we connected tonight, I kind of predicted who that would be. And I know you know who I'm talking about, but that aside, I'll share mine later. Who do you think was a surprise contributor tonight?
Yeah, I'm going with Brandan Boston Jr. Actually, I felt like he made a pretty good impact on the offensive end. Obviously, I haven't really seen Brandon take a shot that he doesn't, think he can make, which is a good thing at times.
Right.
But it also can be, a bad thing. But his shot making, I thought was, just pretty good tonight, and it's really what the Clippers needed. Struggling throughout the course of the game. I think Brian Seaman mentioned they were at 40% shooting for a while in that game, and a few shots from him and Kennard really helped the team throughout the course of this game.
Yeah, I love that kid. His confidence is amazing. He doesn't care, and you've got to kind of have that mentality.
It's interesting because we don't really see that from a lot of rookies, especially those rookies drafted I guess later, you could say, in the draft, who are
Right.
kind of underlooked at times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's exciting to think that this guy is a rookie. I mean, how much better is he going to get? Because he's so good right now. I have no argument with that. My surprise contributor, though, goes to Isaiah Hartenstein. I'm trying to get Hustlestein off the ground. Every time I tweet, it's Hustle with all caps and then Stein. The guy's amazing. I just love watching him play. And I'll tell you why I think tonight he was a bit of a difference maker. Nurkic, and you called the shot, was just absolutely destroying. Hustlestein, that's who he is to me, was destroying him and was destroying Zubats. He just seemed to have his way initially. And then it just seemed like Isaiah figured something out. And there were 2 plays down low consecutively where he just dominated Nurkic. One was a block. This was just before Nurkic came up with that elbow. And I do think both things were related. So to me, that was the surprise contribution, and surprise in quotes, because we're seeing that every single game from Hartenstein. But I thought somebody needed to slow down Nurkic, because I mean, certainly Norman Powell was playing well and scoring a lot of points, but it just seemed like Nurkic's points were just easy, and he was getting them while he got the Clippers into foul trouble. So yeah, my surprise contribution goes to Mr. Hustlestein. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, let's get that off the ground, man. Hashtag Hustlestein. It works. It fits. He's phenomenal.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. All right. Well, and then finally, this is, I don't mean to be negative, but there are some concerns for this team. I think there've got to be. I've certainly got some I can share, but overall, what do you think? In terms of what's the concern when you watch this team play?
I mean, there's a few. One that sticks out to me really, and Paul George mentioned this, post game. It's really the pacing of this team. We saw last year it was a very, quick team that likes to get, the ball moved around like a lot. And this year it's just changed. And you can attribute it to Kawhi, missing time to an extent. But at times, like, you have other playmakers on the team who have I feel like haven't performed the way we expected them to. And I'd say guys like Terrence Mann and Eric Bledsoe, who, are known for kind of making the extra pass and being more energy type guys. And that's what we had in Patrick Beverley, a high energy player. And the Clippers just don't necessarily have that this season. And it's hurt them a bit. I think Nick Batum, you could argue, is the best player for that, as we know he was, with in the G League tonight. So he should be back soon, which I think is going to be a huge addition to this team. I honestly don't think they'd lose to Sacramento and maybe that New Orleans game too if he were playing. But just picking up some of that slack and really slow pace offense is something that I think the Clippers kind of have to look forward to. And then another thing is the shooting struggles they've had. I mean, 102 points, it isn't a lot. We've seen this team score a lot less than last season. Obviously, they were the best shooting team in the regular season. But at some point, you're going to want to, hit a bunch of these shots. And especially in games that Paul George isn't playing well, others need to step up. And we've seen, we've talked about this throughout the course of this season so far. And we've seen it a bit. Luke Kennard, I felt like he's had a great season thus far, but more players need to step up as well.
Yeah, no, agreed. It seemed to me that in the first half, Marcus Morris Sr. kind of took that on himself. It seemed to me that he was taking a lot of shots. So I was tweeting this, and then I had to look it up before I actually sent it out. And sure enough, he's averaging 10 shots a game, and he had 9 at the time, but this was like halfway through the second quarter. He was shooting a lot. He ended tonight with 15 shots. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the team understands that, that they need that consistency. They need somebody else to step up. They need somebody to kind of fill that Batum, that Nico hole that the Clippers have right now. Because you're absolutely right. I think Patrick Beverley is such an interesting player because you look at his stats and you really don't see much, but he impacts a game in a way that's, just. Again, you have to be a real fan to understand it. I think Alex Caruso is the same kind of player. His stats don't jump out at you, but he impacts a game. Nico is that kind of player. And I got the sense today that that Marcus Morris, at least in the first half, was trying to be that guy. My concern, for the Clippers is the fact that I just see so many dumb plays, things that are just. I didn't see as much of last season. I see, lazy passes. I see, Brian Seaman said today, somebody was expected to zig and they zagged, just things that you don't expect from a team that's played together as long as this team has. And it's baffling because it's not like this is a new team. These guys have played together for a while. So it doesn't make sense that they're making these kind of rookie mistakes. They got away with it tonight. They didn't against the Kings. To me, tonight's game was a mirror image of the game they had against the Kings. The Kings just had a little better players, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, motivation to win. I don't know what it was, but obviously, the Blazers were short their stars. But yeah, I'm concerned. 2 games in a row where this team just didn't look as good as I know they can look.
Yeah.
Right?
I think another thing, though, I think we've seen it so far, a few games this season from the Clippers, just playing down to the opponent's level. And I don't want to bash on any other teams, but it's like you play the Pelicans, who are, the last team in the league, and you give up like 40 to Valanciunas. It's just some of the things we've seen from this team we haven't seen in years prior, like, losing. Okay, we've seen them lose a couple tough games last season, but those were at least close. And sometimes they'll get, just have a totally one-sided game. Like, I think they scored 80 against the Pelicans a couple weeks ago, which is, that just like can't happen. Just stuff like this, and those switches where you're just playing down to other teams' level. The Clippers, I think, they're 13-12 now. If they win those 2 against the Pelicans, possibly 1 or 2 against the Kings, they're looking at 17-8, 16-9. So it's just, capitalizing in games that you should win going into.
Yeah, I had actually forgotten about that Valanciunas game. He looked like Michael Jordan. That was unbelievable. And, I like to say that every team in an 82-game season is going to have those one-offs, right?
Right.
There's no shame in getting blown out. Michael Jordan missed a dunk once. It happens, right? But, it becomes a problem when you start to see some, consistency, and I'm not talking good consistency. I'm talking bad consistency, where you're starting to see the same thing over and over again. And you're absolutely right. We're starting to see, some bad habits, I think, form for the Clippers that, they survived tonight, but they've got to right the ship. We are getting a couple of comments in. I'm going to go ahead and they happen to all be from the same person, which is odd, but I'm grateful for it. Thank you. Let's talk Reggie, because Reggie is an interesting character, right? You live and die by this guy. He will absolutely light it up and go for 30, or he'll have a game like tonight where, he shot 2 for 10 from 3. He ended up with 16 points. Certainly, again, statistically, you look at those numbers and that's not bad. I mean, 2 for 10 is pretty bad, but 16 points is a solid contribution. But he didn't play well. He didn't play like Reggie can play. And now, again, we're seeing it kind of consistently with Reggie. He hasn't had a really good game in a while. I mean, are you concerned about Reggie Jackson, or are you just kind of chalking this up to, just a couple of bad games?
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, because it's like I know last season, a lot of people going into the season were, off the Reggie train after everything that happened in the bubble. And then, he'll start playing well for a good portion of the season, and then he'll have like a cold patch. He's been very on and off. And when he's on and off, I feel like it's for an extended period of time. So in a way, I'm concerned, because we just need consistency from, just a few players at some point. And we haven't really seen that from him, but I feel like eventually he should get it going. I do think, in a way, a lot is on him, especially with Bledsoe not being what I think Ty Lue and the organization thought he'd be. Other guys on the team as well, kind of the same thing. Coffee, obviously, kind of out of the rotation now. Winslow, who many thought could be a potential good piece, good playmaking piece, a bigger kind of guy who could play point guard, not really forming out to what the Clippers wanted. I do think a lot's on him, especially in losing Bev too. I mean, just the extra points, that Bev generates too, from what second chance points, just tapping rebounds out, and the Clippers scoring is, huge in games. The Clippers don't have that, and more is on Reggie, and that's not his kind of play style. He's more of, a scorer. And it's like,
right.
It's evident too in the stats. I mean, the Clippers they're the worst in the league, averaging second chance points this season, compared to last year where they were like middle of the pack, or upper in the league. So I think a lot is on Reggie, but eventually he should get it going. So I'm not too concerned right now.
Right. Yeah. Again, I love the Patrick Beverly reference. What I was most impressed about in Pat Bev was that offensive rebounding. He was, in my estimation, the rebounding is about heart, right? It's got nothing to do with height. It's all got to do with heart. Some of the best rebounders were not tall men. Moses Malone, Dennis Rodman. These guys weren't tall in NBA standards, right? And Patrick Beverly has that, or certainly for the Clippers and now for the Timberwolves, has just this innate knowledge of where the ball's going and the desire to get there. And the only person on this team that I think can mirror that is Terrence Mann. I think he can be that kind of player. He's certainly shown flashes of it. Had a little bit of an off game tonight. I'm starting to see on Twitter that people are kind of down on T-Man. I tweeted out because I started to see a lot of T-Man hate that. I'm still a believer. I like him. I think that he certainly learned from Patrick Beverly. I think that's the kind of player he wants to be, and I think can be. So we talked about concerns around Reggie. I agree with you. I'm not particularly concerned. You brought out some other interesting names, Winslow and Bledsoe. But let's talk about the guy who is kind of a key contributor in the rotation. Are you concerned about Terrence Mann?
In a way, yes. From a shooting aspect, because I thought we'd see a big increase, in his shooting abilities this season. Obviously, they said he was working, really worked on it throughout the offseason, and the 39-point game against Utah. Just building off that, I guess that kind of leveled the hype to come up a bit more. So I thought he'd be better shooting. We haven't really seen that too much this season, so I'm a little concerned on that end. But I think, like you said, Mann mostly contributes on the playmaking end, and that just we haven't seen that as well. I think that's a product of what I mentioned before, just that kind of slower offense. And I think he's more of a quick, fast-paced player, like Bledsoe can be in a way. They both have similar playmaking abilities and can really contribute on that end. So I'm concerned in the fact that Mann's not fitting into the current offense in a way, just pacing wise of how it's played. I think it will change and everyone will be a bit better when Batum comes back, because it seems whenever Batum's on the court, the Clippers just do better right away, especially him and Mann too. They're a great duo on the court, but I think it'll change a bit once Batum comes back and the Clippers kind of fill out their roster as more players get healthy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think every criticism of really every team has got to be tempered with, are they healthy? Who's missing? And certainly the Clippers aren't healthy right now. They are missing some key pieces. And Nico is kind of the glue that holds a lot of this together. Mm-hmm. And they're missing that. We talked about Brandan Boston earlier. I tweeted out and I claimed it on Twitter. I'll claim it here today that at some point in the future, should Brandan Boston ever lose his cool and get 2 technicals in a row, it will forever be known as a Boston Tea Party. You heard it here first. It belongs to me. Thank you very much. He's a super confident player. We called it out. This is a great question. Does Brandan Boston have rational or irrational confidence? You said earlier, Griffin, that he hasn't met a shot that he didn't like or doesn't think he can make, is what you said, and I think that's absolutely correct. But I think every NBA player gets to be an NBA player because certainly there's some exceptions. There's guys like the Alex Carusos that didn't come in as great shooters necessarily. They made their mark somewhere else. But I think 99% of the players come in here thinking, man, I can make just about every shot I'm going to take. But Brandon's shooting them from distance. He's shooting them early in the clock, late in the clock. He's taking some shots that maybe you look back on it and think maybe you shouldn't have taken that, which you expect from a rookie. But it's a fair question. I mean, if you're his coach and you see him doing what he's doing, do you kind of pull this guy back, or do you tell him, listen, Kobe Bryant had the same kind of confidence. He airballed 2 shots in the playoffs against the Jazz, but he became Kobe Bryant. Keep shooting, Brad in Boston. What do you think? Rational or irrational confidence?
I think it's a tough situation that the Clippers are in, developmentally wise, because I think, Boston's trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to hit shots, make his mark in the league and stuff like that. But at the same time, you also have to fit into how your team plays. And, we like last game or a few games ago against the Lakers, for example, we saw Boston take a contested three when Kennard was wide open right next to him in the corner. I think a bit, it's irrational, a bit.
Yeah.
Just because in the way that he hasn't proved himself yet, but this is why he's shooting. I feel like a lot because he's trying to, and
Yeah.
I feel like down the line he's not going to turn into like a Jordan Clarkson that shoots every possible shot that he can. He'll develop more on other aspects of the game. Once he puts on a bit more weight too, he'll be able to do I think more than he can now, and he can do a lot. He's a great finisher as well. But like you said, we've really only seen him shoot. We haven't seen him do too many other stuff. He's an all right defensive player, I'd say. Playmaking wise, not as great. I think he can be a great playmaker. He can fit kind of into the Terrence Mann role that Mann was, in previous years. But irrational a bit, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the answer, I think you nailed it. The answer is both, right? I mean, there are times, where you want him to be confident, and he's confident. Let's call that rational. There's times where you want him to be, confident, but not take that shot. and he's confident and he takes the shot, and that might be a little bit of an irrational confidence. But these are the things that you work out over time. Very few players, I think there was a handful. I think LeBron James was one of them that kind of came into the league kind of with maturity above and beyond his age and his experience. Most people have, they got to take that time and figure it out. And Brandan Boston is going to do that. I think. I'm confident. I like him as a player. What's interesting to me about his shot, and I meant to tweet this out and I haven't yet, but you notice how wide his legs are? When he takes a shot, it's so odd to me because generally, when I'm teaching, when I'm coaching a player, I like to have their legs kind of, in line with their shoulders. Just everything kind of is, symmetrical. But Brandan Boston's legs are out to here. It's just, it must be, a comfort level thing for him. But you notice that too? It's kind of a weird release.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, not release necessarily, but stance. But yeah, I mean, the fact that the Clippers got him where they got him is pretty amazing. I think that he's a phenomenal player with both rational and irrational confidence. Before we move on from Brandan Boston, let me ask you this: what do you think his ceiling is? Do you think this is a guy that can be Jordan Clarkson, 6th man of the year type, or is that shooting too low?
I think he could be I think he has the ability to be I think he has the ability to be a starter, probably a very good role player in someone like Mikal Bridges. And I'm not, I feel like people normally, like when people hear role player, they think of like they're not that good. But Mikal's like he's the best role player in the league. And there's some very good role players out there too, along with him. So I think Brandan Boston could be very good in the NBA. I do think he needs a bit of developmental work. And obviously so far with, the Agua Caliente Clippers, we've seen, it work. He scored like 46 just under a week ago. I don't know if you saw that, Jose, but he's done some great stuff. And, the signs are very promising from him thus far. So I think he could be a very good, strong player in the NBA.
Yeah. It's so hard to tell, man. You see players that, that come in, have great games, maybe even have great seasons, and they just kind of taper off. It's such an inexact science, but you've got to look at Brandan Boston Jr. and be encouraged, right? I think the sky's the limit. It's just a question of, kind of, again, getting back to what you said, it's on him now. Is he going to want to put in the work? Is he going to want to build that bulk? And just kind of, put in the work, man, to get to the next level, because he certainly has got all of the characteristics, I think, to get there. It's just a question of whether or not he does it now. All right. Well, I mean, that's it. I think we've covered the game. We certainly covered the star of the game, our concerns. the surprise contributor. Grateful to Seth for the comments. Thank you. Unless you have any other closing thoughts, I think we might go ahead and finish this off, Griffin. Let's do this. Let's finish it off this way. The next game is against the Boston Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, you had a depleted Blazers team. Before that, you had an underperforming Kings team. It's hard to get up for teams like that. It's not hard to get up for the Boston Celtics, right? That's a team that, while they're underperforming in the East, is a team that is great and is a team that is going to give the Clippers and any team really some problems. Yeah. So I have some thoughts around, and I want to get your opinion. If the Clippers were to come out with the same kind of low energy, bad mistakes that they had against the Kings and they had tonight against the Blazers, want to win, want to loss, I think they get blown out by a very good Celtics team. So this next game against the Celtics, I think is kind of important because the Clippers have got to wake up and play with a little passion against a team that is going to, be pretty much, certainly nobody is ultimately healthy right now, but this is a good Boston Celtics team. They're not missing Jason Tatum. He'll be there. What are your thoughts about the next game against the Celtics?
Yeah, it's a huge test, and it's going to be huge for really both teams. I mean, the Celtics are really just about finding themselves this season. They've had last, I think, 5 or 6 games. They've had a great offensive game, then a bad one, then a great one. It just keeps going back and forth, but they've kept their games pretty close, except, for their last game where they blew Portland out by 30. But they should be well rested going into tomorrow where they actually play the Lakers. So, the Clippers have the advantage in that sense that the Celtics will be on a back-to-back. Also, we don't know if Jaylen Brown will play. I think he's questionable for the game tomorrow. I'm just going to assume he play one of two. I don't think they'd want to rush him back. They're just getting Horford back too. Romeo Langford, who could be, a key piece at times in the rotation, in the back end of the rotation. He's come back too. Schroeder's playing amazing. So it's a good Celtics team that I think is frankly better than their record indicates right now. And it should be a good test for the Clippers. I'd assume we'd see Nick Batum back for next game. Who knows about the Serge Ibaka situation and stuff like that. Again, we really, we don't know anything about that right now against, Ennis Freedom and Robert Williams of the Celtics. So it should be a good test for both teams, really. And I honestly hope we see, a high-scoring game from each team. Both have kind of struggled somewhat offensively. Clippers, I would say on and off, but they've mostly been off. Celtics really on and off. But if we have a scoring game, that win or loss for the Clippers, that could, push momentum into the next game offensively, where they play. I think it was Orlando the game after, which is another one they, should win.
Yeah, and that's been the tough thing, for the Clippers right now, winning the games they should win, which I think is something, we've gotten used to from this team, but not so much this season. The Celtics game is a big game. I think it's a big game because of, they're on the heels of 2 subpar games. The Celtics are going to be gunning for them. This is a good team. There's no excuses. You brought up, I forget now. Oh, Serge Ibaka. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that name's come up yet tonight in our recap. I'd love to, talk about each player because Serge is a bit of a mystery. I don't want to go too in depth into this, but, a lot of people again, I keep going back to Twitter. I obviously spent a lot of time there. But, they're calling him washed. They think, a lot of people think he's done. I'm not ready to do that yet. I'm certainly not ready to call it on T-Man. I'm a fan of his, and I think Serge Ibaka is just kind of work his way back into it. But let me ask you, based on what you've seen, and we know who Serge Ibaka is, what he's capable of. Any concern there? Do you think he's washed? I mean, at the end of the day, Father Time always wins, but do you think there's a little left in the bucket or in the tank for Serge Ibaka?
I think there is. I think, just us really seeing it is the main concern because it's Tyler's job, but in the other sense, he has a tough job, and playing Hartenstein, Zubats, and Ibaka. Zubats, who has played pretty well recently,
Yeah.
and Hartenstein, like you said, he's been good as well. So fitting Serge in is really it's hard to do, especially I feel like it's interesting when he plays the same time as Zubats because I honestly I like when they both play at the same time. I don't think it's a terrible thing, but I want to see what Serge can do, just by himself as the premier big man on the floor. So I think in a way there's a little bit of concern there with, what he can do, and the minutes he got tonight in last game were kind of questionable too. I don't know if that's, because of the injury he's had. They don't want to, make him like hurt anything else and then, make him miss more time.
Right.
But in a way, I think there's a slight bit of concern.
It certainly looks like it. Serge had 7 minutes and basically not much of an impact. A single rebound, 1 missed shot. So he didn't do a whole lot tonight. I mean, at the end of the day, what happens when you start to get a little older is the ankle tweaks that you used to just rub a little dirt on and get back out there and play. It takes a little longer. I read somewhere, I heard somewhere that Kobe Bryant his last season wouldn't go to practice, not because he didn't want to practice, but because he was recovering from the game before. It's harder. It's harder to get there, and I think when we get so accustomed to watching players excel that we think they should always excel, but it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, for Serge to get his legs back and his timing back. But I think at the end of the day, I think he's going to be fine, but he wasn't fine tonight. It'd be great to go through each single player. I don't know that we necessarily need to do that. Let's just kind of call it there. The Clippers won tonight. At the end of the day, you play to win. The Clippers did that. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a necessarily entertaining, fun game, although the last few minutes had their drama. I said we were going to talk about the elbow, and we didn't, so let's finish on that. When it happened in real time, I saw a player coming in to box out. I'm a big proponent of boxing out. I don't think the NBA players today do it the way certainly a Moses Malone or a Dennis Rodman used to do it. I think boxing out is a bit of a lost art. So I didn't take any issue with Nurkic coming in initially, but then I saw it in slow motion, and it looked to me like Nurkic eyeballed Hartenstein. He saw him, and he put that elbow up with intent, man. It's so hard to gauge intent, obviously, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was a flagrant 2. I thought a flagrant 1 was fine. Any contact up by the face is going to be a flagrant 1.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, it was because Hartenstein really shut him down down in the block the last 2 times he had the ball. Now, the third time he had the ball, he shot a mid-range and he made it. But I think he was upset. I think Hartenstein was getting under his skin a little bit, and he wanted to send a message. But I was surprised at the Moda Center just blowing up. They were angry, and apologies to any Portland fans watching. But what was your take on that? I mean, that was kind of my evolution of it as I watched that play.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned Hartenstein kind of getting under his skin and stuff like that. I feel like we've seen that a bit more from Hartenstein over the course of the season. It's a good thing. Obviously, you want players that are really passionate, and I feel like Hartenstein's one of those guys. And but the play itself, I felt like it wasn't. I felt like it could have been enough. You could argue if it was a flagrant 2 that it's enough for it. But I felt like it was a flagrant 1, and that was the right call made. It's like you said, it's hard to judge intent. Obviously, he did look at him, but in a way, he kind of glanced away first. And regardless, obviously, Hartenstein's, his face is going to be right there still. So it's hard to look at. It was cool though seeing Hartenstein get that dunk right after. I felt like that was kind of the ceiling point of the game. Really like the exclamation mark on it. So that was a pretty cool thing to see right after.
Yeah, we love to say ball don't lie. We love to talk about the basketball gods. I have seen ball lie, so I generally don't say that But that was such a great karma moment. After all of that, and literally getting knocked to the floor to get that emphatic a dunk
Right.
was pretty monumental. He is now and forever will be Hustlestein to me, and there it is, immortalized forever. Yeah, let's make that last. I want that to. I want him to forever be known as Hustlestein. I'm gonna make it work. All right, man. That's our show. Again, next Clippers game is against the Celtics. It's still Staples, right? Not until Christmas. Against the Boston Celtics. That's our show for tonight. We don't have another one of these scheduled yet, but we'll be back at some point to talk Clippers basketball with you again soon. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for contributing. And Griffin, thank you for your time. This was great. We appreciate the informative Clippers content. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.